The city had sunk into the heart of winter. Snow was falling gently and steadily, covering the streets in a white, silent layer. The lights glowed with a soft, yellow warmth, and the sound of passers-by's footsteps faded into the silence of the night. The air carried the scent of cold, yet within the heart of the city, signs of warmth were flowing, signs that a man named Scrooge never paid any attention to. Scrooge lived alone, not only in a quiet house, but in a world whose doors he had closed his heart to years ago. The days held no difference for him. Mornings came and nights went without leaving any trace in his heart. Time, for him, was neither memory nor feeling, it was merely a number to be counted. His gaze was always fixed ahead, cold and indifferent, never truly seeing a face or listening to a voice with his heart. Scrooge's house was excessively orderly. Every object sat precisely in its place, as if order were the last thing he still trusted. The walls were bare, no photographs, no mementos, no trace of a past that had once existed. At night, the silence of the house was broken by the monotonous sound of the wall clock, a cold ticking that reminded him of time's merciless passage. Scrooge often stood by the window, staring at the street, not out of interest, but out of habit, as if waiting for something that would never come. Once, he had been like everyone else. He laughed, held hope, and saw a bright future ahead. But years, quietly and silently, changed everything. Failures, fears, and disappointments came one by one, and Scrooge learned that to survive, he had to set aside his feelings. He had come to believe that attachment only brought pain and that kindness made one weak. So he closed his heart and built a tall wall around himself, a wall that was both his protection and his prison. That night, the city had a different atmosphere. Laughter could be heard from afar, the windows shone brighter, and people passed by one another with greater kindness. Something like hope flowed through the air, a feeling capable of warming even the coldest hearts. But Scrooge, following his usual habit, passed by this warmth indifferently and returned to his house. When he closed the door, he paused for a moment. The silence this time felt heavier than ever. A small, unfamiliar feeling arose in his heart, a faded memory, like a sound heard many years ago. Scrooge took a deep breath and suppressed the feeling, unaware that this night was the beginning of the breaking of the silence he had sought refuge in for years. It was midnight when Scrooge woke with a pounding heart. The room was plunged into complete darkness, yet the silence, unlike other nights, offered no comfort. The air felt heavy and dense, as if something invisible was moving within it. The sound of the wall clock stopped for a moment and then began again, this time slower and deeper. Scrooge sat up in bed, his hands were cold, and his heart was racing for no apparent reason. A soft, flickering light illuminated a corner of the room. It was neither dazzling nor threatening. Like the light that shines from a long-forgotten memory. From that glow, the spirit of the past appeared. Its face was calm and its movements gentle, yet there was a strange heaviness in its gaze. A gaze that seemed to have witnessed all the years of Scrooge's life. The spirit spoke in a gentle voice, saying it had come to reveal what had been forgotten, not to judge, but to understand. Before Scrooge could utter a word, the walls of the room faded away. The cold receded, replaced by a familiar air. He found himself in an old alley. A place he had walked through many years ago. The walls were cracked, and the lamps burned with a flickering light. His heart tightened. He recognized the place, even though he had spent years trying to forget it. The spirit of the past said, "This is the place where your first choices were shaped." The scene shifted. He saw his younger self, standing taller, with a brighter gaze and a voice still full of warmth. He laughed, dreamed, and thought of a future that now seemed distant and unattainable to the man before him. Watching that image planted a deep sorrow in the heart of the present-day Scrooge. He did not know exactly when that bright gaze had gone out. One image after another appeared. Simple moments, yet pivotal. Choices that could have changed the course of his life, but were ignored out of fear and caution. The ghost of the past hid nothing, neither fleeting joys, missed opportunities, nor the first cracks that had formed in his heart. Each scene, like a clear mirror, revealed a truth that Scrooge had fled from for years. Amid these images, Scrooge felt a deep weight. For the first time, he realized that he had not been the sole victim of time and circumstances. He, too, had created this coldness through his own choices. His breath grew heavy, and his gaze wavered. He wanted to turn away, but the ghost of the past, in its silence, held him back. Eventually, the light gradually faded. The alley and the images dissolved, and silence returned. Scrooge stood once again in his dark room, but he was no longer the same man. Before vanishing, the ghost of the past said, "This is only the beginning of your journey." And Scrooge realized that the path that had opened would never close again. The room was still shrouded in half-darkness. Scrooge stood by the bed, sensing that something within him had shifted, even though he could not yet understand it. The images of the past lingered like quiet shadows in his mind. The silence was no longer empty, it was filled with things that had been buried for years. Before he could take a deep breath, the air trembled once more. A new light filled the room, this time neither gentle nor entirely cold, but heavy and foreboding. The ghost of the past appeared once more, but its face no longer seemed kind. Its gaze had grown more serious, as if it was time to witness truths whose pain was still alive. Without asking a question, Scrooge understood that this part of the journey would be harder than before. The scene shifted. This time, it was not an old alley but a small, simple room that appeared. Scrooge recognized it immediately. A place where, long ago, he had made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. He saw himself, younger, anxious, sitting behind a desk, staring at an unknown point. Standing before him was someone whose gaze radiated hope, yet that hope went unanswered. Scrooge's heart tightened. He remembered this scene well, but for years he had dismissed it as insignificant. Now he saw that moment was not merely a simple choice, it was a wound that had never been given a chance to heal. The ghost of the past said nothing. Its silence was heavier than any rebuke. The image itself shouted the truth. The scenes continued, one after another. Opportunities that were ignored, people who slowly drifted away, and moments when the path could have been changed, but fear stood in the way. Each image reopened a fresh wound, wounds that had been hidden beneath a layer of indifference. For the first time, Scrooge realized that his coldness had not been a conscious choice, it had been a reaction to survive. He wanted to say something, perhaps to explain, perhaps to justify himself, but the words caught in his throat. His gaze fell. Accepting this truth was difficult. The ghost of the past spoke gently, "What you hide will one day shape you." The light gradually dimmed. The images faded, but their weight remained. Scrooge stood once again in his own room. He felt weary, a weariness born from years of running, not from sleeplessness. The wounds still ached, but now they had been seen. Before vanishing, the ghost of the past said, "As long as you accept them, the path forward will open." And Scrooge realized that this journey would force him to face truths he could no longer escape. Scrooge was still standing in his room when the atmosphere shifted once again. The wounds he had seen rested on his chest like an invisible weight. Before he could compose himself, another light spread across the room, this time brighter, more vivid, and lively. A sudden warmth filled the air, a warmth that stood in stark contrast to the cold within him. From within this light, the spirit of the present appeared. Its face was full of life, and its gaze was direct and unflinching. Unlike the ghost of the past, there was no hesitation in its demeanor. It had not come to revive a memory, rather, it wanted to reveal the truth of the present. Without leaving any room for objection, it raised its hand, and the space around them split open. Scrooge found himself in the middle of the city, the same streets, the same people, but this time, not through his own eyes. He witnessed lives he had passed by indifferently every day. A family sat around a simple table, with meager food but genuine laughter. In another corner, a sick child lay on a small bed, yet their gaze was still fixed on the light of hope. The spirit of the present said nothing, the images spoke for themselves. The scene shifted. Scrooge saw himself, not as he thought he was, but as others saw him, cold, distant, and indifferent. Every "no" he had uttered, every door he had closed cast a shadow over the lives of others. For the first time, he realized that his indifference had not been merely a personal choice, but a wound that had spread to those around him. His heart was in turmoil. He wanted to say that he had meant no harm, that he had only wanted to protect himself. But the images continued. People who could have been encouraged with a simple word, yet never were. Moments when a small change could have been made, but were ignored. The spirit of the present spoke gently. These are the results of your present self. Scrooge lowered his head. Seeing the present was harder than seeing the past. The past was over. But the present was still unfolding. There was still a chance to change something, and that thought was more frightening than any image. The light gradually softened, but the truth he had seen did not fade. When he stood in his room again, his heart raced. He had realized that change was not just about making up for the past, it was a responsibility for the present. Before leaving, the spirit of the present said, "Until you see the present, the future will not change." And Scrooge knew that he could no longer close his eyes. After the spirit of the present departed, Scrooge still stood by the window. His heart raced, and his mind was filled with new images. The city lay quietly under the snow, but for him, it no longer held the same silence as before. Every light, every laugh, every small sound seemed like a ray of light shining into him, stirring something within. A feeling of heaviness, yet also a newfound curiosity, had arisen in his heart, a feeling he had avoided for years. A gentle light illuminated the room once more. This time, the spirit of the present had returned, calmer and kinder. Its gaze was full of compassion, and its smile radiated hope. It had not come to replay the past or the present, rather, it wanted to reveal something that had remained hidden from Scrooge's eyes for years. A warmth he had never seen, and simple lives that shone with kindness, even in the midst of hardship. Scrooge saw himself in the streets once again, this time with greater awareness, not just an observer, but someone who could truly feel. A simple family gathered around the small table of their home. The food was meager, but their laughter and affection were abundant. A small child looked up at their mother with bright eyes, and even in difficult circumstances, hope shone in their gaze. Scrooge realized that such warmth had always existed, even when he had ignored it. He had never felt it up close, but now he could no longer deny it. The next scene took him to the neighbors' homes. People with simple lives, hands worn from work, yet hearts full of kindness. Every smile, every small act of help, reflected a life that could be better. If someone like Scrooge had joined them. But his indifference until now had cast a heavy shadow over everything. His heart churned, and his breath came in short. He wanted to speak, but no words could convey the weight of the truth. Each image, like a mirror, reflected him back to himself, a cold man who, for years, had touched the lives of others only with indifference. The spirit of the present said, "This warmth has always been here, but you could not see it. Now that you do, you can change. It is not too late." The light gradually faded, and once again silence filled the room. But Scrooge was no longer the same man. His heart was heavy, yet filled with newfound understanding and a sense of responsibility. He had realized that real life is something beyond accounting and isolation. It is something built each day with warmth and kindness, and it can change with every moment. Scrooge took a deep breath and knew that the path of change had begun and could not be stopped. Now, he had to act not just for himself, but for all those who went unseen. As silence once again filled the room, Scrooge sat in his chair, his heart still beating with the images of the past and the warmth of the present. But now a new fear took root in his heart, a fear of a tomorrow he had not shaped. He realized that the past could not be undone, and the present was still open to change. But the future remained uncertain and full of cold shadows, shadows whose mere thought sent shivers through him. A cold, gentle light illuminated the room once more. This time, the spirit of the future appeared. Its presence was heavy and solemn, veiled in a misty glow that concealed its features. Its gaze was warning and profound, as though it had seen all possible consequences in a single moment. Scrooge felt a weight settle upon his shoulders. The burden of decisions he had not yet made, but whose consequences would reveal themselves years later. The space shifted, and he found himself in an empty, cold room. The light was dim, and the sounds were faint and lifeless. In one corner, he saw an image of himself, alone, without friends or family, old and detached from life. There was nothing around him but darkness and a heavy silence that seemed to seep from every wall. A deep fear crept into Scrooge's heart, a genuine fear that if he did not change, this future would become real. The spirit of the future said, "This may be your fate if you pass through today with indifference. Every choice you make, every action you take, shapes this shadow." The words were brief and calm, yet their weight pressed upon Scrooge's heart, and he could not ignore them. He realized that his coldness and indifference had not saved only himself, but had left others in darkness as well. The scenes passed one after another. Homes that could have been filled with love remained empty. Kind people who needed nothing more than a single look. But he never offered that look. A child whose hope could have been revived with a single word was instead forgotten. Everything was clear. The shadow of tomorrow is shaped by today. Every small decision creates ripples in the lives of others, and this time their effects seemed direct and irreversible. Scrooge lowered his head and took a deep breath. This time, he could no longer escape change. He realized that if he wished to avoid remaining alone and cold, he must act starting now. The light gradually faded, and silence took its place, but this time, the silence carried a heavy yet enlightening weight, a silence that demanded action, not mere observation. Every second of the present could shape a different future, and this was a truth that could not be ignored. Scrooge still stood in the room, his heart beating with the images of the past, the present, and the shadow of tomorrow. But this time, fear was not his only feeling. A newfound determination also flared within him. He realized that if he wanted to illuminate the shadow of tomorrow, he had to take action and break the self-imposed chains of isolation and coldness. Every decision he made from this moment on could change both his own life and the lives of others. A warm, gentle light once again filled the room. The spirit of hope appeared. Its face was calm and kind, yet its gaze was full of strength. It had not come to reconstruct the past or the present, rather, it wanted to show that anyone, even a cold man like Scrooge, could change their path and rebuild their life. Its gaze, gentle yet piercing, sparked a newfound sense of responsibility in Scrooge's heart. Scrooge saw himself in the streets, but this time he was not just an observer, he became part of the flow of life. Children played in the yards, people spoke to one another in the alleys, and every smile, every handshake, created a fresh energy. He realized that even the smallest act of kindness could create a warmth that had been hidden for years, and nothing could extinguish that feeling. His heart was heavy, but this time not with guilt, rather, with the understanding of his own power to change. He knew he could not undo the past, but he could shape today and create a brighter tomorrow. For the first time, he took a real step. He stepped out of the window and moved toward the people, not as a mere spectator, but as someone who wanted to play an active part. The scenes continued, every small action created ripples in the lives of others. The chains he had forged himself were breaking one by one, the wall of isolation crumbled, and with each step, his heart grew warmer. He spoke with people, smiled, helped, and even offered a kind glance to someone. With each moment, a part of the shadow of tomorrow was illuminated, showing that change was possible and it was not too late. The light gradually softened, but this time, the silence carried a new meaning, a silence full of hope and responsibility. Scrooge realized he could no longer turn back to the past and close his eyes. A new path had begun, a path of warmth, kindness, and action, a path that could illuminate not only his own life but the lives of others as well. He took a deep breath and knew that the chains of the past had been broken, and now there was no path but forward. Every second from this moment on was an opportunity to make the world a little brighter and to free himself. As the first light of dawn broke, Scrooge still stood by the window. The long night had passed, and his heart was full of new experiences, fear, sorrow, hope, and a motivation that had been out of reach for years. He was no longer the cold, indifferent man he had been. Now his heart was ready to reconnect with life and embrace each moment with openness. He felt that every breath was an opportunity to change and create a better world, and he could no longer ignore it. The gentle morning light filled the room, pushing aside the dark shadows of the night. The spirit of hope in the present appeared again, but this time without words. Its gaze conveyed that Scrooge's journey had reached the end of one stage and the beginning of a new one. He had realized that every moment of life is an opportunity for kindness, change, and correcting the mistakes left behind until now. He felt that everything had become real and tangible, and that the time to make amends for the past was growing ever more limited. Scrooge stepped into the street. The snow was still falling gently, each flake bringing a fresh, white light to the ground. He saw people smiling at one another, children playing, and the lights in the houses spreading hope and warmth. He was no longer just a spectator, he had actively become part of this life. Every smile, every helping hand, every kind glance broke the chains that had weighed on his heart for years and faded the shadow of the past, as if everything had come alive again. His heart filled with warmth, and he realized that while the past could not be undone, the present and the future were in his hands. He began to speak with people, to help, to give, and to receive. Every small action created ripples that illuminated not only his own heart but the hearts of others as well. The sense of freedom and lightness he experienced was fresh and delightful. He now had the ability to create a life full of kindness and hope, and with every step, he spread hope in the hearts of others. The daylight grew stronger, illuminating the city. Scrooge no longer saw the shadows of fear and isolation in his heart. A new path had begun, a path that, with every step, shaped a brighter future and a hopeful heart. He smiled and took a deep breath, realizing that every second of life is precious and every moment is an opportunity for a new dawn. And this time, Scrooge understood that he was no longer alone, with himself and with others, with hope and kindness. He was ready to rebuild his life and leave the shadows of the past behind forever. This was the beginning of a tomorrow filled with warmth, love, and light, a dawn that would never again repeat the darkness of the past night.